Hey everybody, welcome back to Coach Hall Writes. In today's video, we're going to talk about how to craft a sophisticated synthesis essay. Several AP students often reach out to me and ask, how can I earn the sophistication point? In this video, we're going to talk about some tips to help you with sophisticated writing, and we need to start with what exactly is sophistication? Based on the rubric, you can earn the sophistication point for a couple different reasons. It could be a nuanced argument, insightful analysis, or vivid and persuasive writing style. It's important that the sophistication is consistent throughout the essay. It's not enough to just use fancy words or to have one really strong sentence. The reason why I think it's helpful to know how to earn the sophistication point is because once you know how to earn it, you can start intentionally trying for it. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to earn it every time, but I have found that even when students try for the sophistication point and don't earn it, it does make their essay stronger. And in many cases, it actually helps their commentary score. So here are some techniques that you can use to make your writing more sophisticated. You can craft a nuanced argument that considers complexities. You can look at the broader implications of your argument. You could have a vivid or engaging style that enhances your message. You can have a compelling intro and memorable conclusion. And for a synthesis essay specifically, you can select the sources and blend them very intentionally to help your line of reasoning and ultimately to help your analysis. So here are some strategies that I have used with my own students to help them try for the sophistication point, even if the essay would not necessarily earn the sophistication point on the AP Lang exam. By trying out these techniques, they grew as writers, and it helped their style and commentary, even if it wasn't quite enough to earn the point. Strategy number one is to create a full circle moment. Basically, what this means is that you can start with a relevant anecdote, and then you can revisit that anecdote in your conclusion. Initially, when I introduced this to my students, I had them pick a relevant anecdote and try for a very detailed anecdote in their intro to lead into their thesis. That led to some really unique and engaging introductory paragraphs. So then the next step was to make it come full circle and revisit that anecdote in their conclusion. On the screen here, I have an example of what this could look like. This would be in response to the library prompt. Now, this is a more concise example just to get it to fit all on one slide, but you could add more detail if needed. Strategy number two is to acknowledge the other side. Addressing the counterargument is not mandatory. However, there are times when it can lead to a nuanced argument, and it can help you consider the deeper implications of your argument. One technique that I like to teach my students is how to do a concession and refutation. This is slightly different than a counterclaim and rebuttal. To concede or a concession is to acknowledge the merit of the other side. The reason why I like to see this technique in student writing, when appropriate, of course, is because it shows that you have considered other perspectives before arriving at your own. In some sense, there's a maturity to a concession. And knowing how to concede and follow it up with a refutation is a very useful life skill. A concession shows that you respect the opposing side, but ultimately you are following it with a refutation in order to fully assert your position. By acknowledging the opposite side and then refuting it, if executed well, you are strengthening your argument. You can see on this slide, we have a quick example here in relation to the food truck prompt. For the purposes of demonstration, this might be a more concise example. You might be able to develop it more in an essay. Tip number three is to show the broader implications. A lot of times when I have assigned a synthesis prompt to my students, they've looked at the topic and said, who actually cares about this issue? Or why do we have to write about this? In past years, synthesis prompts have been about educational issues, environmental issues, and other issues as well. Some of those topics are ones that students are readily familiar with, but that's not always the case. And so one question that you want to pose to yourself once you see your topic is, who truly cares about this issue? Who is impacted by it? How and why? You want to dig beyond the surface and really think about those real world consequences or future impact. So if this trend or issue continues in the short term and the long term, how is it going to positively or negatively impact society? Basically, you want to ask yourself, so what? So even if the topic might not seem very controversial at first, like college or libraries or vertical farms, if you zoom out a little bit and examine the issue through a broader lens, you might start to realize broader implications. Here I have a quick example of how you might do this. It's a bit more concise to fit on the slide, but it gives you the idea. This particular technique works well in a conclusion paragraph, or it can be used as commentary in a body paragraph. It depends on how you're structuring your essay and your timing and pacing. Another way to examine those broader implications is to add context from your own knowledge or experience. Doing so can deepen your commentary, it can reveal those real world implications, and it can actually highlight complexity or nuance. One thing I have my students do when I give them a synthesis prompt, regardless of what the topic is I have them think about what do I know about this topic before reading the sources. So, for example, they did the food trucks prompt earlier this year. I asked them what they know about food trucks. They were able to tell me about some of the names of the food trucks in our town. We have a little area where the food trucks can park. They were able to talk about some of the social issues that have arisen because of food trucks. And all of this happened before they read the sources. Here's why that matters. They were able to jot down some quick notes about their outside knowledge and personal experience. And then as they were reading the sources, they were able to connect their experience to the sources. And they were eventually able to use their knowledge as commentary once they wrote the essay. So this works well with a topic that you're already familiar with. However, you can still use this strategy in different ways, even if you're not readily familiar with the topic. You want to make sure that the knowledge or the experience you bring in is purposeful and relevant. So it can come from personal experience. That knowledge can also come from other classes like AP Bio or American History. Here's an example with the libraries prompt. This particular example brings in real life experience to prove a broader point. And it also helps to highlight how libraries are evolving. So again, this is just a concise example to show you what this technique could look like. Here's another example. This one is in response to the historic preservation synthesis prompt from 2024. Some strengths to this one are that it has specific historical and cultural knowledge that goes beyond the original sources. But this issue is not just limited to the cities referenced in the sources. So by relating it to a different city, you're broadening the context there. Strategy number 4 is to elevate your voice and style. One of the ways to earn the sophistication point is because of your vivid and persuasive writing style. I want you to think about rhetorical analysis for just a second. In rhetorical analysis, you're asked to analyze rhetorical choices. The writer makes choices intentionally to develop their argument. When you're writing a synthesis essay, you are the writer and you get to make rhetorical choices. You want to do this intentionally to improve your writing style. Here are some different techniques you might use. You could include an anecdote. We talked about how you could use this in your intro and your conclusion for that full circle moment, but you don't have to do it that way. You could include an anecdote within the body paragraphs as part of the commentary. We saw that a little bit in a couple of the other examples. You could use juxtaposition, so you could contrast. And by juxtaposing certain concepts, that could increase the complexity. You could pose questions. Don't overdo this though, and make sure that it's a meaningful question. But questions tend to engage the reader, so you can pose a question and leave it unanswered, or you can use the technique of hypophora, where you pose the question and then answer it immediately. You can also use detail. The detail could work well with the anecdote itself. By including meaningful details, it tends to make your writing more engaging. Here's a quick example of what this could look like. This example is in response to the food truck prompt. Notice the word choice here. The scent of sizzling garlic drifts from the truck's open window, cutting through the buzz of the city. For some, it's lunch. For the vendor, it's survival. We've got detail. We've got a contrast between for some versus the vendor. Here's one tip for you. Use detail in a meaningful way. There has to be a point to the detail. Here's another example in relation to the library prompt. Sometimes you can have two choices working together. So this one we have anecdote and repetition. It says, I was 5 when I got my first library card. 5 and holding a passport to a universe I didn't know I needed. 5 and learning that quiet rooms can be revolutionary. So we see the repetition of the number 5, which really emphasizes the person's age. We've got an anecdote here, and it's a meaningful anecdote. Look at the word choice. Quiet rooms could be revolutionary. This could lead into a thesis about the value that public libraries hold in the future. So here's another quick example. This one is a question. Sophistication has to be consistent. So it's not just about using a couple good words here and there or having one strong sentence. We want that style to be consistent throughout. I wanted to show you different examples of how to use these techniques so that you could sprinkle them in throughout your writing in a meaningful way. For instance, you might use an anecdote and repetition in one paragraph, and you might choose to use a question in another paragraph. My advice for questions is to avoid questions where the answer is typically yes or no, because sometimes those come across as less thought-provoking. Sometimes they come across as a little bit cheesy. A lot of times you can take the premise of a yes/no question and rephrase it to elevate the question. Here's an example for the historic preservation prompt. If we erase the buildings that hold our history, what kind of legacy are we choosing to leave behind? As a reader, that would make me stop and think. And the great thing about posing a question like this is there's an implied answer. It gives the reader a moment to pause and reflect. You're not necessarily telling them what to think, but you're leading them to that conclusion. So if you're going to pose questions, make sure that they are meaningful. We don't want to just have them be some kind of filler. But admittedly, if used tactfully and effectively, questions are a legitimate technique to improve your style. At some point, one of the writers you studied in class posed questions in their speech, memoir, or letter. This is a technique you can try as well. All right, there you have it. Those are my top tips for writing a more sophisticated synthesis essay for AP Lang. Now, I'm by no means guaranteeing the sophistication point. In fact, a lot of these techniques take practice. So if you're looking to implement these techniques, I would say choose one or two to start with first, maybe one or two that you feel are most approachable. Also, sometimes certain techniques work better with certain prompts. If you found this video helpful, please do me a huge favor and give it a thumbs up. I would also love it if you would recommend this to other AP Lang students. That way they can benefit from the tips as well. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy writing!